The pruning saw came out in November, before the first hard frost had let go of the ground. Alton Renfro was 74 that fall, working his own orchard in a canvas coat gone the color of the dirt, cutting his apple trees down to almost nothing. Not the small trees, the good ones. Trees his father had set out, heavy bearers, 40 of them in a row on the south bench above Piney Fork. He took the tops out of them. He opened their middles to the sky. He left them low and wide and strange, like hands held open, until a grown tree stood no taller than a man could reach from the second rung of a ladder. People slowed their trucks on the Buckhorn Road to watch. It made no sense to them, an old man sawing the crowns off trees that had never once failed to fruit. When his neighbor asked what in the world he was doing, Alton only said the trees would answer for themselves in time, and went back to his sawing. He did not explain himself. He never did. Nobody knew what he was after. 2 winters later, they would. If stories of quiet patience, of old knowledge, and of the real lessons the land teaches still mean something to you, take a moment and subscribe before we go on. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. We read every one. The Renfro place sat up in the Ozark Hills of northern Arkansas, in Stone County, on ground his grandfather had cleared and deeded in 1911. It was hard country, thin soil over limestone, more rock than loam. The kind of ground that made a man patient because it left him no other choice. In summer, the hollows smelled of cedar and hot stone and the green must of the river bottoms. In winter, the sky over the ridge went the pale gray of a dull knife. His wife, Nadine, grew tomatoes and greens on a rocky bench where nothing had any business growing, and fed half the road out of it. Alton, for his part, had always watched things closer than most. He knew which hens would go broody before they did. He could tell you a week ahead when the walnuts would drop by the way the squirrels worked. He had no schooling in it, and read no farm journals to speak of. He only paid attention and remembered. By the second winter, the orchard was the talk of the road. Boyd Latham, who farmed the next place over and had known Alton 50 years, leaned on the fence one gray morning and shook his head. "Alton," he said, "you've gone and ruined a fine orchard for no reason at all." He wasn't being cruel. He simply couldn't see the sense in it, and said so the way you'd tell a man his barn door was standing open. Down at the feed store they were gentler, but it came to the same thing. They figured age had finally caught him. Emmett Chastain, who had the big orchard on the flats, 200 tall trees pruned straight up for the pickers, was kinder than most. He only called it a shame and let it go. Nadine did not press her husband about it. Their son Wade, who farmed alongside them, said nothing at all. He watched from the barn lot and kept his own counsel, the way the men in that family always had. What none of them knew was that Alton had seen this before. He was 18 the winter of 1968, when an ice storm came down off the plains and hung on the Ozarks 3 days running. He remembered the sound of it more than the sight, the whole ridge cracking through the night like far-off rifle fire, limb after limb going down under the weight. In the morning, the young orchards along the river were wrecked. The tall, proud trees, grown straight and high for easy picking, had split clean down the middle where the big limbs forked, torn apart by the ice they'd caught and couldn't shed. But up on the hill, there had been an old orchard, the Tandy place, gone half wild and forgotten. A man long dead had shaped it low and open, the trees more wide than tall, their branches leaving the trunk at easy, spreading angles. That orchard had come through the ice of '68 almost whole. Alton walked it as a boy and never forgot what he saw. the ruined new trees below, the old squat trees above standing like nothing had touched them. He carried that picture 50 years. Now, with his own trees grown tall and heavy, and a hard pattern settling into the winters, he had finally decided to act on it. The reason was simple once you saw it. A branch that leaves the trunk at a wide, open angle sits strong on its shoulder, and when a load comes onto it, it bends and lets go. A branch that rises in a tight, narrow fork holds ice the way a cupped hand holds water. It gathers the weight, cradles it, and keeps gathering until the fork splits the trunk apart. A tall tree with a heavy top catches more ice and has farther to fall. A low, open tree catches less, holds it lower, and lets the load spread through the whole frame. So Alton had cut his trees down and opened their centers and kept only the wide-shouldered limbs, the ones a man could hang his whole weight on and feel them barely dip. He was not stunting his orchard. He was building it for a storm that had not come yet. It did not go smoothly. That first spring, the hard cutting left long stretches of old bark suddenly bare to the sun, and by July, the south sides of a dozen trunks had scalded, the bark cracking and peeling. Boyd saw it and said, more puzzled than mean, that the trees were dying, and Alton just wouldn't own up to it. Alton mixed a bucket of white latex thinned with water and painted every exposed trunk against the sun, the way the old orchard men had, and the scald stopped. The second trouble came from his own hand. He'd taken some limbs off too big, and the wide wounds would not close, and by fall he found borers working in two of them, the sawdust trailing down the bark. He cut those trees back harder, cleaned the wounds to live wood, and after that made his cuts small and let the trees heal as they grew. Then a dry summer came, and the reworked trees, throwing everything into new wood, suffered for it. 3 died back to stubs. There was a week that August when Alton stood in the orchard at dusk and wondered, honestly, if the whole road was right and he was just an old fool cutting up his father's trees. He said that to no one. He hauled water by hand from the spring in the cool of the evening to the worst of them until the rains came back. And it was somewhere in that second summer that Wade walked out one morning, took the other pruning saw down off its nail, and started working the row beside his father. Neither of them said a word about it. They just worked. By the end of the second year, the trees had settled into their new shape, low, broad, the wounds healed over, the wide limbs thick and sure. To anyone who truly knew trees, they looked healthy, if you were honest. Just wrong. Just not the shape a tree was supposed to be. The road had mostly stopped talking about it. Emmett's tall trees on the flats had thrown a heavy crop that fall, and folks agreed the Chastain orchard was the finest in the county. Nobody was thinking about ice. The word came the third week of January. The county extension service put it out first, then the radio. A hard freeze setting in, and warm, wet air riding up over the top of it. Freezing rain. The worst weather the Ozarks knew. The old men at the feed store remembered '68 without being asked, and went quiet. The morning before it came, the air went dead still and heavy, and the sky over the ridge turned the color of old brass. The birds worked the feeders hard all afternoon and then, near dark, were silent and gone. Alton walked his rows at dusk. He put his hand on the low limbs, one after another, feeling how they sat on their shoulders, wide and easy. He pressed a little weight down onto one with the flat of his hand, and watched it give and spring back. Then he went in and ate his supper and listened to the first fine ticking of ice against the window glass. It rained ice that night and the next, close to an inch of it, and the temperature hung below freezing 2 full days. The ridge cracked through the dark, limb after limb, exactly as it had 50 years before. Emmett Chastain lost his orchard, nearly all of it. His tall, straight, beautiful trees had caught the ice in their high, narrow crotches and cradled it until the forks tore open, and by the second morning, his 200 trees stood split down the trunk, whole tops lying in the ice. He walked out into the gray dawn and did not say anything for a long while. Boyd Latham lost half his young block the same way. The power was out 9 days across the county. It was a hard, sorrowful week, and there was no satisfaction in it for anyone. Up on the south bench, Alton's orchard was glazed thick as glass. Every low, wide limb sheathed in ice and bent under it. But bent was all. The wide shoulders took the weight and held. The open centers let the ice spread instead of pooling in a fork. There was less height to it, less top, less to catch, and less to fall. He lost a few limbs he had misjudged. He did not lose a single tree. The low limbs, the ones a man could hang his weight on, sat under the ice and barely dipped, just as they had in the still evening air, and held. Corinne Vaught, the county extension agent, spent 3 weeks that winter counting damage up and down the hollows, orchard after broken orchard. She came up the Buckhorn Road near the end of it, expecting more of the same, and found Alton's block standing whole against the gray sky, low and wide and dripping in the thaw. She stood at the fence a long while. Then she asked him plainly how his trees had come through. Alton told her, the wide limbs, the open tops, the old tandy orchard he'd watched as a boy. She listened and wrote it down careful and took her photographs and asked if she might send other growers up to see. He said they were welcome. He did not say that he'd known all along. He only walked her back to her truck and thanked her for driving out. By spring they came on their own, the ones with trees left to save and the ones starting over. Alton would say, when they asked, that a tree is not built in the good years. The good years only feed it. A tree is built for the one bad morning it has not met yet. Every tree is shaped for a storm that hasn't come. You prune, he said, for the ice you can't see on the calendar. And most men can't be bothered, because the storm isn't here, and the trees look fine, and the cutting looks like ruin. That was the whole of it. The real harvest that winter was not apples, for there were few that spring, on trees still spending themselves on new wood. The real harvest was the trees still standing when the ice let go, and the knowing of how they'd stood, which by then had passed to Wade, and to a young agent's notebook, and to every grower on the road who cut his crowns low that March and opened his trees to the sky. Alton Renfro is 76 now. He still prunes his own orchard, though Wade takes the high cuts these days, and the grandchildren hold the ladder and drag off the brush. The young trees going in around Stone County are shaped low and wide and open, the way the old Tandy orchard was, the way nobody could understand for 2 long winters. He is teaching his grandson which limbs to keep. The wide ones, he says, the ones you can hang your weight on. Thank you for spending this time with us, and with Alton, up on the ridge. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment. Tell us about someone in your own life who saw a hard morning coming before anyone else did. And if you're new here, subscribe, and stay a while. There's always another story waiting.